Hey friends, here is 9 tips to improve your memory at the piano so you can play more confidently, worry less in performance, you're going to have better nerves and control of that, and all the stuff when you use all of these strategies. And if you're new to this channel, I will say that I have several short videos on this topic, but I think this is my first comprehensive video on memory, if you will, since starting this years ago. The reason I want to make this is because a lot of my videos get a ton of attention and they're only focused on one aspect of a certain element of piano playing. In this case, it would be memory. And I'll come up with some strategy or whatever and say, do this way. And inevitably, I get like 100 comments going like, oh, but that's clearly not all you should be doing to memorize. And I'm like, it's a 60-second video. It wasn't meant to be all you should do to memorize. But even in my longer ones, I get these kinds of comments. And I just have to say that unless you're making a 2-hour course on a topic, I personally wouldn't expect anyone to cover all the aspects of how one might memorize or improve their technique or whatever. And yet that seems to be a lot of the expectation with viewers. So I'm saying this right up front, that I'm not going to cover every possible way to memory. At the same time, I will cover far more variety in this video than I tend to cover, simply because it's longer, but I'm also focusing on 9 completely different strategies as opposed to really hunkering down on one. So I'll kind of explain why I did each one and how I found benefit as I go along here. But honestly, the first one is just memorize from the first session. So many people don't do this. They'll play a piece literally for months before they come back and go, okay, now I can kind of play it. It's in my fingers. It feels better. I know what these chords are. And all of a sudden they go, now it's time to start memorizing. Start is the key word. It's like, no. You should be mostly memorized by this point. If it's in your fingers through muscle memory or comfortable enough that you can play through it when you're looking, it should be memorized in every other way by that point. Start from day one and don't make it like a Mount Everest goal, like I have to memorize my whole piece. That's ridiculous. Or even whole sections. You can memorize the most fundamental aspects. So for example, let me just play one single measure of second movement of Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto. Playing it really slow on purpose, just so you kind of get familiar with all the stuff going on. Now, I could just jump to trying to play that whole thing, and in my case, I've played this concerto a long time ago, and put a lot of hours, especially into this page. So I could just go right there and try it. But if this was the first time I was seeing it and that was a sight read, here's exactly what I would do. I would look for how many lines there are at one time. And first of all, I've already done it, I just didn't explain it. I only played one measure. Small bite-sized chunks are the key to memory. If you want to play 45 minutes at a time, obviously you're not going to retain much. And I'm exaggerating, but I mean, even 6 measures sometimes is way too much for your brain to actually process. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 measures is about the most I ever do until I'm more familiar. Then I look at the lines, and in this case, there are actually 3 distinct lines. You've got a chord to start off. Then I have a cello line, if you will. So I'm going to play just that and memorize just that. Yeah, I have it. And of course, you would normally have to do a few more reps than that. But I focus on just an aspect. Now I'm going to go for just the inner voicing chord. 2 and... That's too easy, right? It's just 2 chords and then a single note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. Now I go to the top line. And 2 and 3 and 1. Counting out loud helps too while you're doing this. But you can see the main point is I practiced all 3 of these individually, back to back. Now I might even do combos of 2. So the cello line with the chords. And then without looking. And so on until I hit the cello and the middle, the cello and the melody, the middle part and the melody. Then I can go back to all 3 and feel more confident that I can memorize all of them together. And here we go. So now look without looking. And there we have it, right? So small chunks, break it down into layers, and just take your time, memorize from day one on your first session. My second strategy for memorizing is to break the pieces into sections. Now, this may sound like a basic tip, and to some degree it is, but there's a lot of pianists that do not do this. They just start from the beginning of the piece and they just go to the end and go, oh, I hope I can memorize more than I did yesterday. That doesn't really work. And the main reason is because you're not seeing the big picture. And most importantly, you don't see the role of each section in how difficult they are and what they're really going to require. So this is not a great example. It's Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto. So like every other page is a nightmare. But in your average piece, like you divide the sections in the form, like ABA or sonata form or whatever. If you haven't learned that, then go to the next point, which all the timestamps will be in the description here. But if you have learned that, start with your analysis, and then more importantly, to take it to the next level, identify every part of the analysis as a level 1 to 4 difficulty. 1 is like you could do it in your sleep. 4 is like this looks absolutely impossible. And so what you then do is you should be spending more time on the harder stuff in your memorization so that by the end of your whole study, it's all balanced. Because a lot of people will practice a bunch of stuff that's easy, and then they memorize that just fine, and then they get to the harder stuff, and they're like, oh, well, this is harder to memorize. And in reality, they just didn't give it the proper care. It's not necessarily harder. It's the same process. They just didn't put in the right amount of time because they didn't recognize that it's a level 4 and something else was a level 2 difficulty. So that's what I mean by sections. Point 3 is to do a lot more hand-separate practice. And I mean, this is actually kind of related to point 1 about how I broke it down in the first session. The main difference is that there's actually really respectable pianists. I can name 2 that I personally studied with major prizes that literally never practiced hands separately. I totally disagree with them, but Santiago Rodriguez was one at the University of Miami, and Daniel Pollack was another who took second place to Van Cliburn in the famous Tchaikovsky competition. Like, he was a respectable pianist, had a major career, studied with Rosina Levine at Juilliard, right? One of the greatest pianists of all time. He believed that you should only ever practice your piece slowly, exactly as it's supposed to go, at a slower tempo. And you just do that 1,000 times until it's getting faster and faster and more comfortable. And he's like, hand separate practice? That's a waste of time. Practicing without the pedal? Waste of time. You need to do the complete end result all the time, and that's all you should do. Now, this if you've watched my channel for more than like 2 YouTube shorts, you know that this is absolutely absurd. I would never say this kind of thing. But I have to acknowledge that because I can't say Daniel Pollack is a bad pianist. He can do anything that anyone else can do. So sometimes it just comes down to preference. But my experience is that the more you break it down, the more you understand it. Even if you could play it without breaking it down and doing hand separate, you will still play it better when you do it hand separate. And the reason is because think of like a conductor who goes to his orchestra and has probably spent time studying all the different instruments. He doesn't just show up for the first time, listen to everyone and play and go, you know, the flutes are a little too loud. He would know the flutes are too loud because he spent time practicing and like kind of getting familiar with the flute part. And I don't mean on the flute, but he's probably played through it on the piano, like Rite of Spring. You know, it's going, okay, I know that part, and I'm not really hearing that very much now that I hear it in the whole context. So that's the reason to practice hand separate, is to become more familiar with the role of each hand, and it allows you to hear it in isolation. Ear training is a huge part of memory. If you can hear it better, you can memorize it better. So that's the reason to do hand separate. Away from the piano practice. So this one is kind of hard to describe because everyone has their own practice, but you don't technically need to be away, like in a different room. You can literally just do this, bring the fallboard down, or you could be, Walter Gieseking could actually play pieces and learn entire concertos, supposedly, on an airplane or a train ride, just by studying the scores away from the piano. So I've yet to meet anyone in my entire life that can repeat that, but I've gotten smaller victories along the same lines of like learning a one-page Bach prelude without ever touching the piano and going to the piano and being able to play it. So on a small scale, I can do that. But the point is, what do I mean by away from the piano practice? Basically, you want to think about aspects of the piano without actually moving your fingers. I don't mean you're at a table and you're tapping through the patterns. That's still too closely related, even though you're not hearing it. I mean, there is absolutely nothing happening in your hands. So I'm imagining, let's say Opus 10, number 4, Chopin. I'm imagining these finger movements, but I'm not letting the hands move. You can't read my mind, but I'm going to say out loud what I'm seeing is G sharp, F sharp, E, D sharp, C sharp, D, and that sort of thing. So in my head, I'm picturing my fingers move, though they're not actually doing it. And you might think, oh, what a ridiculous waste of time. But you have to deal with a lot of very respectable pianists, including Horowitz, Garrick Olson even, among the alive ones, who do have acknowledged multiple times that they do mental practice away from the piano. It's a game changer. And again, there's no one right way to do it. I've literally been in bed, lying in bed with my eyes closed, and I will picture myself at the piano depressing the exact keys that I meant to play. And I will find the more I do this, my fingers start to move. And I'm not like sleeping, but I'm like 3/4 asleep, I would say. And I go, it's like it requires so much mental discipline to not allow your fingers to move when you're imagining it, because like something just becomes much more vivid when you're only imagining it in your head. I've also just like I was on a train ride to go take a lesson in a different state, and I had a Debussy prelude I was studying, and I just tried to write out the sheet music by hand, by memory. And I was like, wow, where is the dynamics? What are the dynamics? Is the accent on the third note or the fourth note? And that's the ultimate test of memory, because I started to really figure out what I did and didn't know. That's what I mean by away from the piano. Point 5, random start spots. This is something that I've literally never heard any teacher explain the way I teach it. Well, okay, actually, sorry, that's not true. There was one person that briefly mentioned this in a master class, now that I remember. But very, very rare. The idea is like you just pick a random measure in the middle of a phrase and you just start playing there. And some people will say to practice this way, but it's a whole new level to start there by memory. So for example, I'm not going to try this with Rock 3. I could play it, but I cannot recall it from memory at random. I'll say a Bach prelude and fugue. We've all heard this one probably, C minor. So what you would do is, this goes really great if you have an app with a random number generator, or if you've got a friend that's willing to sit there with you in some practice sessions, which is harder to come across, but some people have that. Basically, you put the number of measures in a generator and you say like, call it out, whatever. It'll have 5, and then you have to remember to start at measure 5. And you would play like only measure 5. I even did a little more than that. But then you spin the dial or whatever and you get 17, and you have to, which I have no idea what that would be. I'd have to look. But the idea is you may not know what you're doing for a while, but the more you try, then you open the score and you go, oh, that's 17. Oh yeah, that one. Okay. You practice it a little bit. And if you do this over several days or weeks, all of a sudden you can literally start with confidence anywhere in the sheet music. And you're going to like pretty much never have a memory slip again in performance. I do this constantly with almost everything I learned. Really, really helpful tip there. Very similar to that. Point 6 is related, but it's not random start orders. It's just out of order start orders. Meaning, I guess I'll try some of this. Not by memory right now, but let's say it's 5 measures after rehearsal 31. So I would play 5 measures after. And I always end on the downbeat of the following measure. So 1 measure plus the downbeat. And now, instead of continuing on, I go backwards 1 measure. And I go from that to where I started the last time. So now that was 4 measures before. Now I jump backwards to 3 measures before. and so on. 2 measures before, 1 measure before, and etc. And what you end up finding out is that it's completely disorienting because your head wants to go on, your ear is used to continuing, and now you not only have to go back to where you started, but you have to go back to the thing that led to where you started. And each time you just like start second guessing everything, the chord inversions, the fingering, you're like, I don't know this at all. So even doing this like with the sheet music in front of you is really helpful, but especially when you try it by memory, you're not going to know it, and then you have to go back and check, and the answer is given to you. So and by the way, with a lot of these strategies, it's like nobody's going to do all 10 of these or all 9 or whatever every time they learn a piece. I kind of pick and choose based on what I'm feeling. Frankly, all of them have potential and potency. And so if you just kind of use 2 or 3 of them, that's probably enough. But the reason I'm presenting so many is some people will certainly like some options over others in terms of their regular routines. And throughout the years, I've mixed them up. I'll pick a few that I really like, and then I kind of get bored of practicing the same way. So then I go and do several more options. Oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting what my 7th strategy was. The irony of that, right? It's a memory video and I'm forgetting the next topic. One of them, though, I know for sure, I think this was actually number 8, but it's flashcards. And it's kind of similar to what I just mentioned, but like not necessarily reverse order or random order, maybe not even the measures, but you can make flashcards that have cue points for you, or what I call jump points. So when my students are getting ready to perform, we do 3 recitals a year. 4 to 6 weeks leading up to each recital, I say, what are your 6 jump points? Or maybe it's 10 for a longer piece or 4 for a shorter piece. But a jump point is like, if you have a memory slip, how do you get back on track without freaking out? And the really easy way to do that is to have pre-programmed spots that you're used to starting at no matter what. And then you actually practice in the jump point. So let's say I'm playing this measure that I referenced earlier. And for whatever reason, I get off and I play the wrong note. And I freak out, I start panicking, I stop. Heart rate goes up, right? Because you're in the middle of performance and everyone's watching you, and 1 second feels like 10 seconds. And you're like, how on earth am I going to keep going? Here's what usually happens. Student gets freaked out and goes back, tries to play what they just played a second time. And now knows, I just got it wrong. And then what happens? You get it wrong again. And they kind of henpeck around this. I'm sorry to call some of you out. Like, some of you are going to be extremely called out right now because I've taught over 130 students, and I've seen this happen with more than half of them over and over. So, but this is just how it goes, right? And myself included. And you just completely crumble. That's one thing that could go wrong or that might happen. Another thing that happens is instead of going back, you keep henpecking your way through the next section. And you literally make up like 3/4 of what you're doing. You're still playing, but you're definitely not getting closer to getting on track. So my teacher always said the jump points are for emergency situations where you just stop playing, take a second to breathe, and then go, okay, I'm going to call this a loss. But I know that in 5 measures I have a jump point and I can start there, no problem. You know, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, that's a breath of fresh air. I'm playing very quietly, by the way, because it's like 11 p.m. and my neighbors won't be happy if I play the loudest part of Rock 3 with full force. So in any case, the idea here is that you have things that are your security blanket. It's a parachute, and it's a backup parachute to the parachute because life happens. So you can go through all this stuff, and 99% of the time you're going to be more confident with memory, but I can't guarantee you won't have a memory slip. I've performed over 600 times in the last 15 years live, and I mean, it's not like I kept tabs, but if I had to guess, I would say roughly around 100 of the times I had some form of a memory slip, which might have literally been like I forgot a couple notes. It might have been I forgot a whole measure, I forgot a whole section, or in the worst situations, this only happened one time, but I completely forgot the rest of the piece, so much so that I just had to stop and walk off stage. And I literally left stage crying. I was in tears. It was not a great moment. Yeah, anyway, I can tell that story some other time. It was totally my fault. I was underprepared and I put myself in a situation I shouldn't have been in. But in any case, those all count as memory slips. So it will still happen. But the other 500 times I didn't have them. So, about a sixth of the time something goes wrong. Honestly, the longer I did it, the less that happened. It's not like up to the last performance, it was the same ratio. Most of my memory slips were in my first 5-6 years because I didn't know how to handle this. And there weren't people like me on YouTube making videos like this. In any case, that gives you some ideas. Oh yeah, the last one I definitely wanted to talk about is recording yourself. And basically, the reason for this is because recording adds pressure. It adds this sense, kind of like a teacher is there, and like everyone ever, when they play for their teacher, says it sounded better at home. And whether or not that's actually true is very, very subjective. But it will often feel this way because the teacher adds pressure, and there's a part of your brain that gets kicked into high gear going, I actually have to pay attention whether this is good or not. Whereas if it's just you let a lot go without even realizing it. So what happens when you record yourself is, even if you're not going to put it on social media or something, there's still something in you that feels like you're being watched. Like right now, even the camera's being right there, I'm feeling like, what if I say something wrong? Or, which happens all the time, which is why my videos have so many jump cuts in them. But I always worry about that, and it kind of causes me to pay more attention and actually think about my words. I'm so much more careless with my words in actual teaching situations with my students. And I don't mean I have a sailor mouth. It's just I don't really try to craft everything perfect and then I'll be like, wait, no, that's not the way. That's totally wrong how I explained that, and I'll clarify. But on camera, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I should have a teleprompter, although I'm the opposite of that kind of teacher. But in any case, that's kind of the reason recording can help, is it just activates a part of your brain that pays more attention. And therefore, it will add stress on purpose so that it kind of emulates a performance, whether it's for your uncle or your best friend or for Carnegie Hall debut. Oh, okay, actually, that was point 7, is how to add stress on purpose to make memory more secure. So what I mean by that, and this is actually 9 because I went out of order from what I was going to do, but whatever. You got 9 points. You came for 9 points, you got 9 points. Here's the last one. How do you add stress on purpose? It could be a lot of things. Distractions, right? So this is like a finishing touch. This is not how you memorize, this is how you polish your memory. So you've already played your piece by memory several times, let's say. You feel like you have it down. Now, during your performance in a run-through, throw on distractions like a phone timer going off before you'll finish. Have a friend jangle keys, or like what I do with my students. I literally take a broom and sweep up to their feet. I've taken my drumsticks and beaten them a half an inch from their head, to be super loud and obnoxious with their permission. We discussed this. I'm going to do X, Y, Z while you're playing, and I want you to just not listen to it and keep going. So don't worry, I'm not abusive to them or anything. Some students are like, yeah, please don't do that. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. We make it very, very calm. But I've literally thrown blankets on top of students. With his permission, I threw a tennis ball at a student's back while he was playing. We get creative, right? Do what you're comfortable with and have a friend to come help out with this if you can. But distractions are a big part of why memory slips start. You're doing fine, but you're going on your muscle memory. And you kind of just get lost in the music or whatever. And all of a sudden, the phone rings in the audience, or a fire alarm goes off, which actually happened once, or anything, right? And you're playing and you're like, where was I? Because it kind of breaks your your zone, your Zen state, whatever. And you go, what am I doing? I don't know where I'm at. Am I even the first half or the second half? Have I taken the repeat yet? And you just sort of get in your head. So what we do in your practice is you practice distractions that are far more absurd and far beyond what you'll ever experience in a concert hall or in a real situation. And you just get used to tuning it out and being like, okay, no, he's throwing keys at me. I'm going to keep playing. He's mopping under my feet. I'm going to keep playing. you know, if I'm like one of my students. That's how that goes, right? And so then you hit a real situation where it's like, oh, it's just a phone ringing. I can keep going, right? Versus you haven't practiced anything and now the phone like freaks you out. So adding stress with the purpose of tuning it out so that when there's a little bit of stress, it doesn't throw you off. There you go. 9 tips to memorize music. Now, for a 10th tip, I've made a video. It might be my oldest video on this channel because I published it in like 2016 and then I didn't publish on YouTube for like 7 years. Memorizing pieces quickly, I think is what I called it, the ARM, the ARM Active Recall Memory method. Check that out because that's its own method that actually can be used in conjunction with all 9 of these. Because it's not necessarily a method, it's an amount of repetitions and how you get there quicker. And you can use that combined with reverse measures. You can use it combined with random start spots, with hand separate practice. So it's kind of like the overarching memory rule that you apply to everything else. If you enjoyed this video, comment below what your biggest takeaway was. If you haven't seen it, get my free piano guide at the top of the description. It's going to change your life. I literally put in probably 200 hours into that thing. There's charts, there's diagrams, there's stories of concert pianists, there's technique, memory tricks, learning hit tricks, practice habits. I mean, I literally can't say enough about this guide. Over 1,000 people have now downloaded it, and I've not heard one person complain about how it's not been super beneficial from them. And it's free, like literally. Just put in your email, it'll get sent to you right away, and you're going to love it. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.